Hey, welcome
Hello.
back, other Brandon.
Yes, I'm glad to be here, Brandon.
We're going to talk about Oppenheimer
Yeah,
because Dan never watched Oppenheimer.
cool. Okay.
And I took like a year to finally get to it.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned this before, but it's one of those movies that I knew I wanted to be able to dedicate my entire attention to.
Really focus on it,
Really
really absorb
focus
it.
on.
Sure.
And I felt like while I was working on Stormlight, I didn't have that brain space.
Yeah, makes
If
sense
that
to me.
makes sense.
Makes total sense to
Like
me.
I watched it like the week after I finished Stormlight 5.
You had laid down that load.
Yeah, and I hadn't even realized it, that I'd been putting off Oppenheimer for that reason. It's just every time it came for a movie, I said, let's watch something fun.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Because the movie was there to offer a balance to the very intricate plotting that I was doing in Stormlight 5.
Yeah.
And so I finally sat down and watched it, and I told Dan, expecting that he would have already seen it, and he hadn't seen it. And so we didn't get to talk about it, but now we do, because you have talked about it. Or you have watched it.
I have watched it.
Yes. So, what do you think about Oppenheimer? I mean, that's kind of a dumb question to ask when it was movie of the year and a lot of people's best picture and won all the things. But, you know,
Yeah.
what do you think of Oppenheimer?
Yeah, it felt like there's sometimes when you watch film and the film feels like poetry.
Mm-hmm.
Like where it's saying things with juxtaposition and it's saying things with imagery, and it's like using the full palette of what a film can use to communicate. Oppenheimer felt like that. You know, like if I was going to do explaining Oppenheimer justice, I'd watch it 2 more times. Because there was a lot. It was drinking from the fire hose. It was a really smart mind telling a story in a really interesting way that had all sorts of beats that weren't completely linear, but that in the end gave you this really interesting picture, like a brilliant way to do a biography of a human.
Yeah, it was.
What did you think?
Oh man, I was blown away. But
Yeah.
I am an absolute Nolan fanboy, right? I'm
Yeah.
one of those people who gets up on the top of the house and I'm like, Tenet was awesome. What do you mean? And a lot of people are down on Tenet.
I thought Tenet was cool. Yeah. I thought it was hard to grasp on the first watch. Yeah, because it was so intricate and smart. But I thought it was really cool.
But it is in some ways cooler to see him take his narrative style and apply it to a biography. Did you see Dunkirk ever?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dunkirk was the same way, where it's like, how do you make a war film about one of the most famous, events in World War II, which is already probably the most famous war, right?
Right.
And how do you make it interesting and different? And lo and behold, he did it with his intricate use of timelines and things like that.
Yeah, the way he told it helped.
Yeah.
And that's always him, right? Like the way he tells it is such a huge part of the story, right?
This it kind of blew me away. I knew it would. That's part of why I was saving it.
Yeah.
But it absolutely blew me away. Just so good. And so like a look at a person where I love it gets in his way now and then, but I'd rather have it be this way. I love Nolan's attention to authenticity and detail.
Yeah.
Right? Like when I found out that to make Dunkirk, they got the actual planes that were flown during that period and had stunt pilots fly them at Dunkirk. And the landing at the end of Dunkirk, where one of the pilots lands on the beach, it's at the beach in Dunkirk, and that's the actual plane, period. Stuff like that.
Yeah, like there's this thing that happens when you have this meticulous attention to detail that crosses almost to the absurd. Like an example that I can think of is the this like a weird example maybe, but the Harry Potter world at Universal Studios.
Yeah.
Like I had some friend through Scholastic was one of the guys that worked on it, so I got a behind the scenes tour of that thing, and they did stuff like they went to England to get the right screws for the train, and they like repainted the train once they saw that in the movie the brush strokes were like side to side instead of up and down, right? Like going over the top to like meticulously get all the minutia there. And though that almost seems ridiculous in certain specific instances, there is something to a cumulative effect from all that minutia that leaves you with a different feeling than when something's a little half-baked.
It's the elven underwear philosophy.
Yeah, tell me that.
So when they're filming Lord of the Rings, for all the elves, the extras, they got them outfits and then elven underwear. They're like, no one's going to see the underwear. They're like, yeah, but this helps create, like...
They will feel more like an elf.
They will feel more like an elf if they have elven underwear.
And they will transmit more like an elf because, I think there's something to it. I think if you can, you should. Why not, right? If you can, you should.
And part of that, when it applies to Oppenheimer, that is so great is I knew Nolan wasn't going to cut any corners in storytelling. Like, it's okay to combine events and things like that to make a biography. But what I hate is, and this is a good movie, but like Take a Beautiful Mind, right? Good movie, really good movie. But then you get down to that movie and you research the actual person, and it's outlandishly different in many cases from the person presented in the film.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. They went heavy on the. I fictionalized this,
and maybe the personality was similar, but they like leave out, like in that case, they left out like an enormous amount of infidelity by the main character because they made it a sweet story about him and his wife. So the infidelity just doesn't play very well, and it's still a good movie. But I like going into Nolan knowing Nolan's going to do everything he can to present as accurate a picture of the person as a biographer can. Nobody can actually present a person.
Of course.
Right? And you always are going to have to combine some scenes and things.
And there's educated guesses, and we're doing the best we can. Yeah.
But even things like the apple incident. You remember the apple incident where he poisons
the cyanide apple or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever poison he used.
Oppenheimer himself is like, I believe, someone can fact check me on this. I went and read up on it after. He's like, I can't tell myself if that happened or not, or if I dreamed it.
Oh, really?
Oppenheimer says.
Yeah.
And so they choose to but at the same time, there's like you have to make some of those decisions, right?
Right.
And whatnot. But it's pretty cool to know that like events like that really did come from his life, and just the attention to detail on all of that. I love being able to go into the film and get this presentation of a person who is complicated and wrong in some areas and right in some areas and just really messed up in some ways, like every human being is.
Sure.
But also brilliant and complicated morality, like a movie that doesn't say, look how great or how terrible. It's like, look how great and terrible this was.
Yeah.
So great film.
I will say just quickly on that fact check, the biologist Jeffrey Wyman, his friend said whether or not this was an imaginary apple or a real apple, whatever it was an act of jealousy.
Okay, so it wasn't Oppenheimer himself who said that.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer told the story, and they don't know if he's because he's sometimes
vague.
Yeah. So there's a good fact check for me. Now I will say, Nolan's attention to these sorts of things. There is one spot. I'm glad that he does it this way, but there's one spot that holds him back. Did you know he refused to use CG for the explosion?
I didn't know that.
He refused and I saw it, and maybe it's because I just know Nolan. I know he hates CG.
Yeah. Okay.
And once in a while, like for instance, Dunkirk, right? They can only afford a certain number of extras and get them. And so he won't use CG to expand the number of extras to make it look like there's the actual number of people that would be there. It's just like, this is what we have, we'll film with it.
Yeah, he's not going to Peter Jackson his orc horde or whatever.
Yeah. And in this case, like I saw the explosion and I'm like, meh, right? Because I've seen the actual like test footage and stuff. It did not look like the actual test footage to me.
Yeah,
it was okay, that's a scale model.
Right.
And I kind of wanted to be blown away, pun intended, by that moment.
Yeah. Well, because it's as far as a climactic moment.
Yeah.
One way to look at the movie is the whole movie is a ticking time bomb.
Yep.
Right. That looks ahead to and back to that explosion. Right.
Yep.
And so, you want that to really hit hard.
So that's like my only complaint.
Yeah, that's not a huge complaint.
I would have enjoyed that being enhanced a little bit.
It's an aesthetic complaint.
But the fire and stuff that they did at the beginning, those aren't CG. Like they did a bunch of different tests with different minerals to make the sparks and things against the blackness. I don't know if you're remembering that, but all of those things.
As you speak of it, I'm remembering it. Yeah.
And they look fantastic as practical effects. So.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's an interesting challenge to do a human. I remember I had an English teacher who said in his belief that the purest way to study humanity is through fiction.
Yeah.
And his argument was that a biography is an educated guess, right? Like no one really knows the motives. We're guessing at the motives. An autobiography is inherently biased. It's just very hard to not be biased. But he said, but with fiction, if you have an artful fiction practitioner, they are free to assign the motivations that they think make sense to their characters, right? Like without being constrained by what really happened or what might be or educated guesses. It's like, no, I made this dude up and he's this, right? I'm going to portray him as this. And he would argue that fiction is the greatest study of the human heart and mind. And so I sometimes think about that when I watch the attempt to do a biography, thinking like in some ways, these guys are more constrained than I am when I make up a character. You know, these guys are constrained by trying to like, okay, what did he really think? And was the apple real and literal, or was it, you know, but also the challenge of trying to do it is fascinating. You know what I mean? Like, and using a little bit of fiction to, you know, you're never going to write a biography where you don't use some fiction, right? Where you make some assumptions. If you're going to dramatize scenes, you weren't there, right? And so you gotta dramatize them as faithfully as you can. But there's also.
So what did you think of, like, one of the talking points about Oppenheimer is the score, and the sound mixing.
Yeah.
So this is a Nolan thing, and people often complain that the sound mixing makes it hard to understand dialogue, and the
that's
score
true.
sometimes overwhelms the dialogue.
Yeah, that was true sometimes. There were times when I lost a little dialogue, but it wasn't a chronic problem. You probably have. I'm assuming you watched this in your theater.
I did,
and so you've got some of the best sound in the state or the country. How was it in that environment?
If you can control it, like people had a big problem with this in Tenet, and I didn't.
Yeah,
and they had a problem with it in Dune 1 in theaters, and I didn't. I can get my sound really crisp and kind of perfectly aligned for just a few people in a theater. Yeah. And so I would say for me, I didn't have that problem with this one. I did notice it in Tenet, not as much as other people did. I should say that I did notice it now and then. Yeah. In this, I didn't ever notice it.
Why does he have that problem?
I think it's just it's not an artistic wouldn't call it a problem. He'd call it an artistic choice. Yeah.
I think he's gone on record as well to say, like, his movies are meant to be watched in like the highest quality theater you can find. So for him, when he's making movies, he's like, I'm gonna mix this as if you are in an IMAX HD theater for you to watch.
Yeah, like you're sitting in the studio beside me with these special speakers and or $30,000 headphones on or whatever.
So there's like one person in the state of Utah who can appreciate his films. For those who don't know, I have a it's called a screening room, not a theater, because of it's a commercial grade theater of my own that's it's a little overboard.
It's like your Skywalker Ranch a little bit if you were Lucas, right?
I've been in J.J. Abrams' theater, and mine's better.
That's awesome. Well,
his though has to do something different than mine.
Yeah.
His theater's job is to simulate being in a big theater with a bunch of people. So his has to be like giant and empty.
Yeah.
In order to be like, this is what's going to look like from the back row. This is what's going to look like from the front rows. So his is.
He wants to be able to do that. He wants to see it from all the perspectives of the theater.
His is better for for what he's doing, but mine's better for actually watching a movie if you just want to sit down and watch it by yourself.
Yeah, if you wanted to have the perfect cinematic experience. Mm-hmm. Well, and yours is so creatively done, which is just beautiful. It's like the creativity that you used in it is like, yeah, give some money to the creative guys. You know what I mean? Because they'll use it inventively, you know?
And they did.
Yeah, because it really is. It's a beautiful theater.
But we should go back to Oppenheimer. One of the things I really like is the way that music was used. And this
say more.
Feels like, to a novelist, feels like cheating. Feels like having access to the cheat codes, the narrative. And it makes me so envious because, like, Oppenheimer should have been boring. And I'm sure there's some audience who didn't like it for, it's 3 hours long and it's a couple of separate courtroom dramas mixed together with a little bit of family drama and things like that, right?
At certain ages, I might not have liked this movie. When I was younger, I might not have liked it.
So it's totally okay to not like anything when it comes to art.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that having the ability to give a powerful score to pull you between scenes like he does. And so Oppenheimer works on one level. Like at its core, it works because it's a fantastic story acted by brilliant actors, really well written, right? Like it just hits the core pieces. But the level up why it works, not level, but little less deep, is that it has a fantastic score and it's cut in such a way as to propel you from scene to scene, so you never have time to get bored by that scene before another one's happening. And so it's a 3-hour long biography that somehow works on the same level as a TikTok video.
Oh, funny.
Right?
Because the music is keeping the momentum.
Because the music is keeping the momentum, and it is constantly cutting between timelines so that your brain is going like, oh, what's this new thing? Oh, it's this timeline. This is what's happening here. Oh, it's cutting to this timeline. And by manipulating that and using the music in the same way, it makes a 3-hour film feel like it's an hour long.
Well, and this is part of what Christopher Nolan does, is let you watch a movie in sort of the style of putting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
Right? Like, here's a piece. Here's a piece. Here's a piece. And so the mind is occupied. How are these going to fit together? And how is this? And then when it does fit together in a kind of a cool way by the end, that, of course, that's very satisfying to finish a jigsaw puzzle.
You ever wanted to write a book like that? Do you consider any of your books written like that?
No. No. Like my head's just different. I remember I was like, there's this author named Diana Gabaldon.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah. I've been on done a cool panel with her. She's really nice.
Yeah, I did a thing with her up in Canada one time.
Yeah.
And she
wrote Outlander, for those who want to know.
Yeah, Outlander, yeah.
Yeah.
And she said when she writes a book, she writes it like a mosaic. She just writes this scene, and then this scene, and then this scene, and then this scene. And when I'm saying this scene, I'm talking about hopping around. She just hops around and writes whatever scene she wants, and then kind of like pieces it together like a mosaic or like a jigsaw puzzle. And when she explained how she writes, I was like, I don't know if I could ever write one novel that way. It's different than how I work. I'm very linear in how I think and how I plan. And so I'm there with the characters, watching them evolve through the story kind of in a linear way. And my brain hasn't figured out how to do it different. How about you?
So I don't think I've ever done Nolan level wackiness with this sorts of things.
Yeah.
I do enjoy the puzzle that is writing the Stormlight Archive books, which I talked about. Like, the mind load upon me writing those is very difficult because I'm weaving in a lot of flashbacks, and I'm weaving together multiple character arcs, and I need you to not quite grasp what's going on with some of the characters till you get to certain points in the story, and so
which is so artfully done and really fun.
They're not nothing's as intricate as Oppenheimer that I've seen, but I do really like playing with non-linearity and trying to get different plot lines to hit certain beats at certain times in order to have certain emotional investment or certain emotional reactions that you carry through to another chapter that's strategically placed there from a different viewpoint. That sort of thing.
Resonance from a character's history in the past carrying over to their present moment, right?
I really do enjoy that stuff, but man, the reason it is so hard for me, I don't know if it's hard for Nolan, the reason it's so hard for me is you have a picture of what that's going to be. And then for me, I write it and then I sit down and put it together and I'm like, man, this one is 80% off from where it needs to be. This one is 20% off. This is 5% off. As you read it through, then the amount of revisions you have to do to get all of those tones to work together.
To click and be in sync.
And all of the foreshadowing to click at the right time. It's super, super, it's just a different experience from writing another book. Like when I write something like Trust of the Emerald Sea, the most popular of the Sega projects, I sit down, I make an outline, I write the book straight through, and then I revise it.
Yeah.
When I write a Stormlight book, that is not how it goes.
No, and it doesn't read like that.
Yeah.
Like a fun thing about reading one of the Stormlight books is that you never know where that next chapter is going to be. You don't know where in time. You don't know with who, with what character, and it's the unpredictability of that is a good antidote to boredom. You know what I mean? Like, and when that unpredictability then adds up to a cumulative effect, that's really rewarding. That the jigsaw puzzle worked. We have all the pieces in place and it clicked together in a cool way. That's really satisfying.
Not the only way to tell a story, but it is a lot of fun. And man, Oppenheimer just really clicked with that.
Well, it's a way to create extra kinds of resonance, right?
Yeah.
And like almost like going back to that first thing I said, like in a lot, like this is also an old English teacher phrase that I got, but this old dude back when I was in school said the essence of poetry is juxtaposition. And I really liked that idea. The idea of taking seemingly unlike things and putting them together so that we find what's like about them, and that the meaning that gets generated by doing that is this extra kind of meaning that isn't otherwise available.
Yeah.
You have that going on nonstop in Oppenheimer. You know what I mean? Like the power of juxtaposition. There's the face value of what the scene is saying, but the interesting, strange order that the scenes are placed in just sucks out all this more meaning and resonance, and that's fun.
So Robert Downey Jr. Won Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor on Oppenheimer.
Yeah.
And he said something really interesting. And I don't know where it was. It was in the last year where he's like, which, by the way, mad props to him for saying it this way. He's like, I think my acting in Iron Man was as good as my acting is in Oppenheimer, but people won't take seriously a film because of its genre. Something along those lines.
Yeah. I remember something similar.
Which is, number one, it's pretty cool that sometimes you'll have people say like, well, those superhero movies, everyone knows they're trash, so you just,
Yeah, you phone it in, you do what you got to do. Yeah.
He didn't do that, right?
Yeah, he basically went and said, some of the best work I will ever do is Iron Man, but it went a little bit unnoticed because of the genre.
Yep.
Yeah. That's right. You're pulling that offline?
That's my job.
That's his job.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I mean, the acting was spectacular in the film, but it is interesting, that aspect, right? Like Robert Downey Jr. to get an Oscar couldn't be Iron Man. He had to be,
Yeah.
he had to be I won't say, I don't want, I guess we're giving all kinds of spoilers. He had to be Villain Man in Oppenheimer and get his, go through kind of the emotional range in a drama that he would go through in a different film, but here he gets the Oscar.
Well, and if you think about it, when you talk about numerous puzzle pieces finally clicking into place, one of the great moments in all of grand storytelling was I am Iron Man.
Yep.
Snap. You know what I mean? Like there was so much that was so beautifully set up. It was such like that snap was one of the great payoffs, I think, in all history.
Oh yeah, I would agree. Like, I know they are the highest grossing filmmakers of all time, so they do definitely have lots to laud them, or among the highest grossing. But I don't think enough is said about the Russo brothers coming and taking like 30 disparate films, many made by different filmmakers, and creating kind of a climactic 2-part series that
it seemed almost impossible.
Yeah, incorporated arcs from Jon Favreau's movies and from their own movies and from just, Thor movies and brought them all together by all of these different people, and made it feel like it was a climactic ending to a lot of different stories. Like, I've had to take over one person's series.
Yeah, I was going to say
Wheel of
this
Time,
is the perfect example is that.
right?
Yeah.
But that was one person's vision that I had to give a climactic ending to. And then,
lots and lots of characters, and
lots
lots
of characters,
storylines, and lots of books, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the part that you were taking a lot of disparate elements and doing an almost impossible thing, unless it was a pretty good computer of a brain, to absorb so much data and then bring that to a climax.
I still think I'm more impressed by the fact that, like, with Robert Jordan, it was one person with one vision, with a lot of different characters.
Yeah.
They took a bunch of different films by a bunch of different people.
It's a good
and brought
point.
them together.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. No, it's a good point.
And they are the third highest grossing directors worldwide from all the stuff they have
So
made.
is number one Cameron, or is number one Lucas?
Spielberg.
Spielberg's
Okay. number one. And then Cameron's 2.
Cameron's 2? Okay. Spielberg's getting it because of number of films made. He's just made way more films than the rest of them, huh?
True, but Jurassic Park
Yeah.
grossed $1 billion. So
Jurassic Park is a behemoth.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that'll do it. And Cameron's Avatar, and then Avengers Endgame, of course, is pulling the Russos.
Yeah. Yeah. Who's number 4?
Peter Jackson.
Jackson, really? Lord of the Rings? I thought that they're... How is Lord of the Rings beating Lucas?
I don't know.
That's kind of interesting, because I know those movies did well, but I feel like they did well by what people expected them to make.
Lucas is number 24.
And Lucas
He's
is number
way
20.
down
Oh,
there.
it's because he didn't direct.
He didn't direct. Spielberg did all of his big ones.
Yeah. Well,
and he didn't direct Empire Strikes Back.
He didn't direct Empire. Did he direct the first one though?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but Empire was
But
Spielberg.
he didn't do Empire. Did he do Return?
No.
Yeah. So there's that. But he did all the prequels, huh?
I think so, yeah.
He did the
24.
prequels, and his biggest one is Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
So, and then Nolan's like 7.
But it's kind of funny that you would have this really grand
Mhm.
comic book universe movie, and you'd be like, who can tie this all together? And you're like, let's get the dudes that did Arrested Development. You know?
Yep.
Which is pretty funny.
Yep. So, any closing thoughts? Like, I've talked a lot about what I thought of Oppenheimer.
So another thing that I liked about
Mhm.
Oppenheimer, another thing that's if we're using the Pritchard scale from Dead Poet Society of greatness,
Yeah.
it's that's an important thought of what that meant,
Yes.
right? Like to cross that threshold of, yeah, we're gonna drop an atomic, we're gonna go to the world of atomics and use that on people.
Mhm.
I mean, the importance of, like, how did that come to be, and what were the choices behind that, and how much of it was science saying, can we? Then we should, if we can. You know, like
Right.
that kind of thing, right? Like,
Mhm.
just the importance of the topic. I think every human being should ponder the topic, if not see the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the topic is very important, and the way the movie was done, by not giving you easy answers, forces you to ponder the topic in a very human way. I thought, you know.
It's one I've thought about a lot, right? Would I in that position? And I don't know that I can accurately answer it.
Yeah, it's a tough
Right?
one, right?
Like, I don't know, I don't know if any human who's not in that position can genuinely answer what they would do.
Do the full thought experiment.
Yeah.
I think about things like, I had a grandpa who was a World War II pilot,
Mm-hmm.
and he was one of the dudes that was at Pearl Harbor when Pearl Harbor was bombed. He was one of the few pilots that got off the ground that day.
Yeah.
And so he had friends who were murdered. You know, he had friends who were killed in a surprise attack. And so I know for him, he was like, yeah, they started it. I'm fine with going to war. You know what I mean? Like, because they killed my friends. And so when you're that in it, there's certain perspectives that you could only know if you were that in it. Like, I heard his perspective of that. It doesn't give me that doesn't mean I have that perspective. But hearing his perspective, I go, yeah, that would feel different if you'd watch a nation come and kill your friends. You know, that's different than, like, academically, would you or would you not? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It was really cool to frame the entire movie kind of around that conversation between Einstein and Oppenheimer, in a very Nolan sort of, what did they say? And then he delivered on that punchline. right? He delivered on the, I think that we did open the can of worms, right? Like we didn't burn the atmosphere, but yeah.
But we might have
done the same thing.
Knocked down the first domino to lead to that result, right?
Yep. Cool way to end the film. Great movie. What more you need to hear from two yo-yos who, right?
Or just spouting our opinions, right?
Who one of whom took an extra year to see the movie and waited until after it won all the awards before being like, well, maybe I should see that film and give my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah.
But loved it. So, yeah.
So here's the next big question. What's he do next?
Nolan, we're talking?
Nolan, yeah. What is Nolan? He's got his Tenet, which some argue is his like the most Nolan film ever.
Yes, I've called it the most Nolan film that ever did Nolan.
Yep.
Yep. He did his blockbuster superhero film.
Yep.
I don't know. He I'm sure has some ideas in the back of his head, and he's gonna like when he said my next film is Oppenheimer after Tenet, I'm like, really? Yeah, that's next. But then he proved that he could do it.
He had a vision, yeah.
Yep.
That's right.
So, do you have a favorite Nolan? We'll end there. What's your favorite Nolan?
Oh, I don't know, man. One I really loved was just Memento. Which was early and before I'd seen his other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember when I saw that one, I was like, whoa, that's a cool way to tell a story.
Yeah.
It was one where the mimicry of the timeline so perfectly connected to the experience of the main character. I don't know if it's merged that perfectly since, but I like a lot of his stuff.
I think Oppenheimer probably takes the crown for me.
Is that your favorite? Yeah,
I think it probably is, now that I've given it time to reflect. Before, I don't know that I can answer. I think on the podcast, I wavered on what my favorite was. But I think Oppenheimer does that.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard for me to pick a favorite, right? Because there's so many that are awesome.
How's that, Dan?